It's the Happy Families podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
But I just want to emphasize, anxiety itself isn't the problem. We need to stop pathologizing that. It's the response to anxiety.
And now here's the stars of our show, my mum and dad.
Podcasts at happyfamilies.com.au. That's podcasts with an S at happyfamilies.com.au. That's the email address to send us your questions. We love your listener questions. Every Tuesday we answer them. Today, it's the 4th of July. So for our North American friends, happy 4th of July. We know that this is a very big day, Independence Day in the United States.
Do they say happy 4th of July?
I'm pretty sure that's what they say. Yeah, I think it's happy 4th of July. And probably also worth mentioning that Canada Day, since we're talking about our North American friends, Canada Day was just a couple of days ago as well, on the 1st of July. So happy Canada Day for all of our Canadian friends. Eh?
Hey.
All right. So let's dive into this one. Now, this one's actually got a bit of a North American feel to it, even though it's happened in Australia. And it was one of those questions that came through. It's such an unusual thing, but it ties in with so many things that so many families will encounter in terms of their kids being anxious. It's just that this, well, like I said, it's got a slightly American tinge to it, and you'll see why. So this comes from a mum by the name of Annabelle. She was in Sydney. Just to be clear, this happened in Sydney, and it was just over a week ago, 2 weeks ago. She said, while sitting outside with our 3 young kids at a fast food joint, my husband spotted a gun in a man's pocket. Didn't know if it was real or fake, but he quietly alerted me. We told our eldest, our 7-year-old, that we may need to leave sooner than expected, and it was really important that he listened to us. The man didn't go inside, and we stayed where we were because we didn't want to draw attention to ourselves. And my husband was able to discreetly tell the staff who called the police. When the man started to walk away, we took the kids inside, and when they were alone in the bathroom, my eldest told his dad that he was really, really scared, and he didn't understand what was going on. My husband reassured him but didn't give any details, and then we went to leave, and that was just as the police arrived. And my son overheard the conversation with the police on our way to the car. That night we answered all of his questions, and he spent the night in our bed. The next day was easier, and he hasn't mentioned it since. Question: we don't want to create unnecessary anxiety. Is it okay to just not talk about it again if he doesn't raise it and it seems okay? He's someone who has a hard time letting things go, often bringing up things from months or even years ago. So I read that email and I thought, kids experience all kinds of challenging moments, times where they could be scared or anxious. And while this one has that gun element to it, I thought, well, this is kind of the sort of thing that a lot of families go through all the time. What happens when your kids experience something that's a little bit scary, when they have a lack of predictability in their lives? And they're anxious. What are we supposed to do? How much do we continue the conversation? Where do we go from there?
I think one of the things to recognise first up is when we find ourselves in those situations, whether we're children or adults, there is a level of anxiety that comes with it because we don't understand all the details. For this little boy, he recognises that there's an element of stress. He can feel it. The tension's in the air. Mum and Dad have acknowledged that we need to leave, but he doesn't understand what's going on. And so just the lack of knowledge is enough to create anxiety in lots of people. It's a normal response to that kind of situation.
So this is what the Australian Psychological Society defines anxiety as. Anxiety is a natural and usually short-lived reaction to a stressful situation that's associated with feelings of worry, nervousness, or apprehension. In other words, something that's stressful happens and you get worried and fearful about what might happen as a result of that, and that's called anxiety. It's natural and it's short-lived. And so when I'm reading this email, what I'm thinking is we've actually got a really healthy response here. We have a habit, not just in this country, but around the world, particularly in Western nations, well-to-do nations, we have a habit of pathologizing anxiety. And what I mean by that is we think that there's a problem if you're feeling anxious. And I want to shout this from the rooftops. Every time I do another anxiety webinar or another anxiety seminar or talk to a whole lot of parents about anxiety, I just want to scream it out loud. There's nothing the matter with being anxious. Anxiety is a normal and healthy response to a stressful situation.
When it becomes a problem, though, when you can't go about your normal day-to-day, when it infiltrates the normal day-to-day happenings,
right?
That's when we need to be concerned.
So when you have impaired function, or the other time that it becomes a problem is when you're anxious about nothing. Like there is no stressful situation. It's an imagined future event that you're stressful about, but you don't know what it will be. You just know that it's coming. And so you're fearful. And so what we're talking about here is there's what we call an internalization process going on. And the worries and the fears about some unspecified future event are clouding your capacity to function right here, right now. But generally speaking, most of our anxieties, especially a situation like this where you've said to a child, there is an issue, we're not going to talk to you about it right now, but if we ask you to leave, you need to do exactly what we say. This is important. Like you can imagine, you've got the intense eyeballing. You've got the low, serious tone in your voice. You're making sure that your child is fully attentive.
They're now on high alert.
They're on high alert, that's right. And what that does is it hijacks what we call in the brain, there's a little part of the brain called the amygdala. It's part of our limbic system, and that's the emotional part of the brain. And it kind of takes over our rational thought, and just all of a sudden it activates the sympathetic nervous system, which is our fight or flight system. So you've got a little 7-year-old who's suddenly gone from parasympathetic rest and digest, everything's comfortable, I'm feeling good, I'm with people that I like and life is predictable, and now we've activated sympathetic nervous system responses, fight or flight, shallow breathing, rapid perspiration. What is going to happen next? And that's where we sort of move into, if it's not dealt with effectively, that's where we move into difficulties with anxiety. But I just want to emphasize, anxiety itself isn't the problem. We need to stop pathologizing that. It's the response to anxiety that's the problem. So when we give a response to anxiety that doesn't allow for a healthy way of processing, or where that unpredictability is too high and that sympathetic nervous system is pumping out all of that adrenaline, all of that cortisol, all of those stress hormones, that's when we start to move into big processing issues, and that's where we start to move into anxiety disorders and trauma, which ultimately are just a result of unhealthy responses to anxiety. So again, the anxiety itself isn't a problem. It's the way we're responding to the anxiety that's a problem. Even with an anxiety disorder, what are you worried about? Nothing? Okay, so let's process this healthily, because that unspecified thing in the future that you're worried about, that unspecified stressful event that's meaning that you can't function today, if we can process what's going on for you right now healthily, the anxiety will be managed and reduced, and you can get on with your day. Ultimately, anxiety comes down to processing.
So you've used this word processing. So in relation to our children, if we were to help people, help parents dealing with challenges related to natural responses of anxiety in different situations, what would you say would be the top 2 or 3 things that we need to do as parents to help our children process their anxiety in healthy ways?
The number one thing that I would say is don't fight the emotion. Don't try to fix the emotion. Don't pathologize the emotion. Don't tell your child they're wrong for having the emotion. Instead, take a leaf out of the Gentle Parents book from Parental Guidance and simply say what you see. The ability to, psychologists have been talking about this for decades, the ability to name it, to tame it, may be one of the most important things that we can do to reduce anxiety. When a child is starting to hyperventilate, starting to say, I'm really scared, when the amygdala has taken over, when they're in fight or flight, the best thing that we can do is say, you're really worried right now, aren't you? There's this great quote from Haim Ginott, and it's actually, it's been a quote that I've used in workshops for years, and I recently picked up Lisa D'Amour's new book. It's called The Emotional Lives of Teenagers, and in the front of that book, she quotes Haim Ginott. One of my favorite quotes of all time. It is a deep comfort to children to discover that their feelings are a normal part of the human experience. You see, when you've got a child who's 6 or 7 and they've got this big emotion, it's getting bigger and bigger inside them, and we say, stop it, calm down, cut it out, stop being so silly. When we do that to their big emotions, their big anxieties, their big fears, worries, and things that they're apprehensive about, it tells them that that emotion that's inside them makes them dysfunctional. It tells them that there's something the matter with them because they're having this great big feeling and they don't know what it is because they don't have the emotional vocabulary, the language for it. And so not only are we telling them that they're a bad person, we're telling them that they're dysfunctional because something is happening inside them that we don't approve of. What Haim Ginott is saying is just let them know what you can see. You're really worried right now, aren't you? Because when you give that emotion a name, all of a sudden your child recognizes that what they're feeling is universal. All people feel this, and my parents can see it in me. And now that it's got a name, I know that I don't have to be scared about it anymore. That great big feeling that was taking over, it has a name. It's called anxiety. It's called fear. It's called worry. And now I can deal with it, or at least I can start to respond to it a little more healthily. I can process it a little more effectively. And the second thing I would recommend is to say to your child, would you like me to stay with you to help you? Or would you like to have some space? Like, for me, that has been a game changer, both in my relationship with you and with the kids. Just saying, I know you're feeling really, insert emotion here. I know you're feeling really stressed. I know you're feeling really anxious. I know you're feeling really worried. I know you're feeling really angry. I know you're feeling really sad. Whatever the emotion is. And if I'm wrong, you'll always tell me, and so will the kids. No, I'm not feeling that at all. I say, what are you feeling? And then I get that clarity. I say, okay, well, I know you're feeling really this. Do you want me to be with you? Like, do you want hugs? And do you want to talk about it, or do you want some space? And a 7-year-old will tell you, I'm scared. I want you with me. Or they'll say, I'm angry. I want you to leave me alone. And so you can. And then you go back to them a couple of minutes later and say, I left you alone like you said, but I just wanted to check in. Do you still want space, or do you want a hug? Do you want to talk about it? And for me, that's the most powerful thing that we can do. Developmentally, our kids are experiencing this really concrete thinking. It's really black and white. And that's only exacerbated by this emotional fight or flight response. And so I think our job really is to step into the moment with our kids and just be there with them, name it to tame it, and give them the space, and then talk about it once they're calm.
I know we've been talking about a 7-year-old, but just recently our 15-year-old actually had a panic attack. I had left the house and I got a message from one of the girls to say that they needed help fast. When I walked in, I was absolutely blown away at how distressed our daughter was.
Yeah.
She almost couldn't breathe. Like, it had really just absolutely taken over. I have actually never been with somebody in that situation. I've never dealt with it firsthand, and I wasn't sure what to do. I just knew she needed to know that I was there. And so I just grabbed her nice and tight and I said, I'm here. I just need you to look in my eyes and realize that you're okay. You're okay. I'm here. And what was so astounding to me is just how powerful our brains are and how quickly it escalated for her.
Yeah.
She went from being completely in control to completely out of control.
Yes, they'll call it an amygdala hijack.
And yet how quickly we were able to diffuse it once she had something concrete to look at and to change the perspective, because in that moment, all she could think about was the 101 things that were creating this panic attack. But to have something concrete to bring her back down. And within a few minutes, she had really come down. I just said, do you want me to cuddle you, or do you want me to leave you? And she just rolled up into a ball on the bed with me, and I just sat there with her for probably about 20 minutes. And I felt as her body regulated, her breath, her heartbeat, everything calmed down. But it really was, like you said, just sitting in that space with her. You're okay, and I'm here as long as you need me.
Yeah. Now, there are one or two other things that I just want to quickly jump in here. We live in the lucky country, right? So guns are not really an issue here. We recognise that there are guns in this nation, but we don't tend to come across them in everyday life. It's very, very rare for typical families to come across guns unless there are very good reasons for that family to have guns in the home. It doesn't happen. So it's rare. But again, this anxiety stuff, it comes up all the time. The effectiveness of our responses to anxious moments is what we're really talking about. And I just want to emphasise, as we go back to Annabelle's email, the last thing that she said was, do we bring it up and talk about it again? Or, because this is a kid who does ruminate and will bring things up several months later. So I don't have a perfect answer for this, because I'm not sure that there is a one-size-fits-all answer. This is general advice. A guy called Tim Wilson wrote a fabulous book a few years ago called Redirect, and he shared some science in there looking at first responders and whether or not going through counselling was good or bad for them. So there's this idea that talk therapy is necessary. We need talk therapy, especially when we experience traumatic events. But what research has shown is that quite often talk therapy does exactly the opposite of what it's intended to. It exacerbates, magnifies, and amplifies the anxiety, the stress, the trauma. It actually leads...
You actually go back. You put yourself back in that space.
Right, yeah. It leads to ineffective, unhelpful processing. Now, is there a blanket rule that says that you should or you shouldn't? No, it depends on the individual, and also depends on the time frame. Like, you have something hard happen to you, and sometimes you just say, I don't want to talk about this. But maybe 6 months down the track, you say, I think I'm ready now. Or 6 years down the track, you say, okay, it's not going to traumatize me to talk about this, and now I can work through it because I've got enough distance. So what my inclination around this is with your kids, whether they've seen a gun in public or there's been a police incident or a car accident or just something horrible happened at school with bullying, if they've got that anxiety, my suggestion is check in with them after a week or so and say, hey, you know that thing? Do you want to talk about it anymore, or are you feeling okay? I just want to check in and see how you're reacting to it, see how you're processing it, and let them be your guide. If they say, I don't want to talk about it, and you can tell that they're scared, you can say, okay, no problem. We'll give you some space. Do you want to talk to a school counsellor or someone about it? No, okay, no worries. Let it be and check in again a couple of weeks later. But if they give you a really nonchalant, no, it's cool, then you know that they've probably processed it, they've dealt with it, and just move on. I don't think that we want to be digging too deep into fresh wounds. We may be making it worse.
I think one of the other things that has been really good for me is I don't think anybody ever helped me recognize the times where I was feeling anxiety, this idea of naming and taming. And so as an adult, there are certain responses that I have in different situations where it's only as I've been, I guess, learning about emotional regulation with our children that I've recognized, I'm actually feeling anxiety right now. This is a bit intense. And so for me, being able to actually articulate that for myself helps me then understand when my kids are in that space as well.
Brene Brown's got this really cool thing. She says, if you can use a sentence before your own emotions, it gives you the distance that you need to process them effectively, healthily, functionally. And that sentence is, I'm beginning to notice that I'm feeling. And so what we've got there is we've got this distance where, I'm standing outside of myself and looking in and noticing that I'm starting to feel anxious.
Yeah.
And teaching your kids that kind of phrasing as well can be really powerful. We could talk about this for a lot longer, but I hope that answers Annabelle's question and is useful for anybody who's got kids who are dealing with some anxious moments. The Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Rulon from Bridge Media. We really appreciate Justin's work, and Craig Bruce is our executive producer. If you would like more information about making your family happier, please consider becoming a Happy Families member. It's because of our Happy Families members that we're able to provide all these free resources to help you. Your contributions through the membership help us to help more people. And of course, when you become a member, you get a whole lot of premium content as well. So Happy Families memberships are available at happyfamilies.com.au. If you're not a member, please consider signing up today. It's cheap as chips, and it makes a huge difference in your life, as well as helping us to continue to do things like this podcast and the Facebook page and all the things that we do to make families happier.